Okay, hi all. Welcome to this event by the K&L Gates Endowment for Ethics and Computational Technologies at Carnegie Mellon University. Today we're talking about AI ethics alongside a recorded play-along of Detroit Become Human. We might talk about spoilers in this stream, so beware for those of you tuning in. My name is Adya Danaditya, and today I'm joined by Abhijat Biswas, a PhD student at the Robotics Institute at CMU, who works on getting robots and other autonomous systems to understand human nonverbal signals for safer and more efficient human-robot collaborations. We're also joined by Beatrix Livesey-Stephens. We can call her B. She is a linguistics student at the University of Aberdeen who has previously done research on the moral permissibility of human-android relations and implications for human relations. He's the one playing the recording in this stream. They will respectively lend their expertise on the game and the topics surrounding it. So hello guys, how are you today? Hope you guys are fine. Okay, so before we start, we're going to start and hear the opening remarks from Professor Ila Nurbash on the series.
Good afternoon. I'm Elon Rash at Carnegie Mellon University, and I'm very pleased to welcome you to Detroit Become Human playthrough commentary, discussing ethical perspectives of AI through contemporary gaming. First of all, I want to thank our partners on this. Adya Danaditya put this together as part of a special internship program he's running. And of course, Beatrix Livesey-Stephens will be playing the game with Abhijat Biswas, graduate student at Carnegie Mellon, providing commentary throughout. And this event is also supported and sponsored by the OLab at Carnegie Mellon University. Artificial intelligence is a boundary technology. It's changing our understanding of computation, of thinking, of the ways in which sociality pervades our interactions with computer systems generally. And gaming is an outstandingly interesting way for many of us, even those who never play artificial intelligence connected games, to start to imagine those futures and start to see the ways in which we relate to non-human entities that have social construction. And so for that reason, I find it particularly exciting that we get to present you with commentary provided in a Twitch format where anybody can watch a really experienced gamer play the game, and at the same time we can start to learn about the narrative structures of those games and the ways in which they help us push on the definitions of being human and being non-human in this crazy world we live in now. So I find this to be a really fascinating new way of thinking about the kind of discourse we need to have about what we expect and imagine artificial intelligence to be in our future, and the role we as humans will have in that hybridized future. I invite you to enjoy this game, enjoy the commentary, to engage in discourse yourself. And this is an experiment. This is the very first time we're doing a program of this nature through the K&L Gates Ethics and Computational Technologies Endowment that we have at Carnegie Mellon. And I hope it's the first of many experiments we'll be running in different ways to engage with publics of all ages in really having a deep discussion about what it means for artificial intelligence to pervade the society in which we live. Enjoy the game, enjoy the playing that Beatrix will do, and enjoy the commentary that Abhijat will play. And once again, big thanks to Adya Danaditya for running this program for us and making it possible for us to try and experiment on this grand a scale. Enjoy.
Okay, so that's from Ila. Regards from him. I don't think he can join us today, but he's recording a video. So I think we can start with the game. So B, why don't you start explaining what's going on in this game at this point?
Right, so at the moment we are seeing the Cyberlife retail store, which is a store in which you can buy androids. So those are essentially robots which approximate humanness, so they look and sound human and try to approximate a human in whatever ways they can, really. And we are seeing the store through the point of view of one of the androids.
Yeah. Really seems like a dealership of some kind. People like go inside and look at the models. And it's definitely strange to see them like exhibited in a way that like mannequins in like fashion stores, and then you have the prices there. I mean, like it's about and like as we see in the game, like we have like this kind of androids being sell, and it's about the same as I said before. It's the same like price as cars, and it seems like the game is not set too far in the future. I mean, like by the way people dress, it's like something that people use now. I wanna ask Abhijat on like how far is this in terms of technology? Is this possible in the next say 15 or 20 years having this kinds of androids being sold at those price point like buying a used car per se?
Yeah. First of all, thanks for having me on this panel today. As for your question, 15 and 20 years is probably very hard. I think we're, I mean, at these prices, I don't know, maybe half a century would be my guess. But I'm a little bit pessimistic on it anyway. I think the major challenges to achieving something like this, well, there are many. I think we don't have the kind of computer vision systems you would need. The natural language understanding, I think, is really far away right now in sort of, understanding, and also natural language generation is pretty far away. Um, I think, well, at least from the video game, it looks like the android is pretty realistic looking in terms of their skin, their facial expressions, these things, or comparable to the human at least. And I think that is a part that's also pretty far away. Something that we might make good progress on, I think, in the next 10 to 20 years is the actual sort of movement and mechanics of these robots. So there's a field called soft robotics, and there's a related field called under actuated robotics, both of which I think are making really good progress, and maybe we would see something that would be able to, really drive an android and would have sort of human-like locomotion. I think that's possible. But yeah, barring sort of like a major leap in, um, real natural language understanding, generation, and metacognitive ability in these, in the systems that we have for AI today, I think that's a stretch.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good to know that we still have time to prepare for all this kind of societal changes that might have if we have this kind of robots running around. And like as you said, it would be if there is, it would be a bit like expensive, right? It wouldn't be at the price point that the game suggested of like around $8,000 or so.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think that would be a
Right.
hard stretch. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're moving on into another chapter here. I think this is the part when this is Marcus, right? The Android B, right?
Yeah,
He's
are
in
we
the
on the painter now? Yeah, so at the moment, we are about to see an android Marcus who is going to get paints for the person who essentially owns him. So he's running an errand to go get paints. And you can see a lot of different types of androids in this scene. So we just saw a care droid who was helping their owner on a walkout. I You just saw a personal trainer droid with their owner who's telling them how far they've run, for example. So androids can be used in this universe for such different purposes, and that really gives a lot of credit to the people at Cyberlife in terms of the drastically different types of androids they can be making only a few years into the future.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's a very expensive Apple Watch. No.
yeah, yeah. And one thing to note in this is like if we see the droids, the jobs they are doing. I mean, like there are care droids and like personal trainer droids. They're doing things that are like actually jobs that need human qualities. I mean, like personal trainer should be like motivating, and like the care droid should be like exhibiting empathy and stuff like that. Aren't those qualities tough to crack and simulate well computationally? Isn't it better to keep these things to human? Abhijat, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's a really good sort of like distinction you make there between those two qualities. So yeah, if you were to ask me, I would say there are certain things humans are good at, and there are certain things sort of computers are good at. Um, Computers are very, very good, for example, at really hard calculations, at sort of holding multiple things in memory and consideration all at once, making sort of really complex branching, making sense of really complex and branching data that's quantitative. Whereas for something like you were saying, like something that needs empathy, something that needs a real understanding of what it's like to be a human, I would say it's hard to have a pre-programmed robot really exhibit those qualities. I think, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know the like exact like goal of like the writer of the game has in like setting this up, but like yeah, it's curious to see that like robots are used in a way in jobs that are yeah better suited for humans. I mean like if you had robots, would I don't know about you and B. I mean like have a robot, I wouldn't use those robots to care for my grandfather or like say my baby. I mean like I would entrust that to human, but maybe that's just me. How about you?
Can I come in here?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so when I was doing this gameplay, I kept thinking like, oh God, what if I was cared for by an android and it just like went wild, which is what this whole game is about, really. But yeah, I cannot stop thinking about how in this universe people are trusting androids with such huge tasks or such intimate tasks. So we have like Connor, who's the detective android who we're going to meet in a bit, and we're trusting him with such an important task, and we're trusting Marcus with Carl, who like is almost helpless without him.
Exactly. So we might see a deviation from the real world on that, I think. And I think right now in the game we're seeing like anti-android demonstrations. There's a lot of animosity from people to androids, at least negative sentiments on it, and the most common rhetoric like I see in the intro so far is like the rhetoric that is most common is like androids are taking away jobs. This brings the question: if it will go down to this in real life, what will happen? Like if most jobs will be done by AI, like what do you think we should do, Abhijat? I mean, like this is something that certainly not easy to answer, but like I would like your opinion on this. Like Andrew Yang is famous for running his president election campaign on this premise of like let's do UBI because like most jobs will be taken by robots anyway. Um, or maybe there's another way, like say maybe should we restrict deployment of robotics and AI to save jobs? What do you
Yeah,
think we should do at this point?
so there's like a few different threads in here, so I want to like kind of go one by one on them. But I also kind of also want to just comment on the way this game is portraying this protest, right? Like there are some people, and like this certainly may happen. There are some people who are sort of blaming this problem on androids, and there's a technical challenge there, which is like, or like there's a technical thing that has happened, which is that there's this new technology that allows people or allows some jobs to be replaced by androids. But there's also the question of like you're mentioning sort of social policy question of what happens to the people who are displaced, and sort of what jobs are these androids put in. all of these considerations, I think, in my opinion, these protesters are directing their anger towards what's on the street, this android, rather than sort of like the people who are in charge and who haven't done a good job of protecting them, their lives, um, and yeah, stuff like that. And yeah, like UBI is sort of a solution that's gone around and people have talked about as a potential solution to this problem. I think there are certainly that's certainly a good idea. I think there are other things such as if there are androids that can be productive in society and do all the things that need to be done for society to function, wouldn't you want to spend time with your children, with your grandpa, rather than sending an android to do that while you're balancing spreadsheets in Excel?
Exactly.
I think it's sort of the facade uh, can fall, it can sort of fall apart a little bit on some critical thinking, and like maybe that's not exactly the intent of the game developers here. Um, but yeah, there's sort of all of these problems that are social that interact with the technology, and I'm guessing we'll talk more about that in the rest of the stream.
Right. So we see that the android, like in the opening, is now like transported back to a house. B, can you talk more about that?
Yeah, when I was playing, I cut the opening cutscene to save time, but basically the android that we saw at the beginning, this is her right now because she was hit by a car, got repaired, and now she's being brought back home, and the man who owns her, is immediately treating her like garbage, yelling at her, being incredibly snappy. Um, so she's doing all these chores now for him, and something that's quite interesting, that I noticed when I played the game is, she comes back and he immediately says like, "You've been gone for 2 weeks, so this place is a mess." So it really portrays like how people who now have androids in this universe are much less able to take care of themselves and their own in environments, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you were saying, yeah. Go on, Abhijat.
No, I think that's sort of another sort of social challenge that may arise, is that as we become more dependent or even like reliant on these androids, it might be that sort of basic life skills may degrade, or like people might not learn to do some things for themselves as time goes on. But yeah, I think you were going to bring up another point.
Yeah, I was just curious. I mean, like, are we going to be stuck in this conundrum of like having machines do things that actually are not good for them? I mean, like not good for the machines itself. I mean, like, um, there are better things they can do, but machines end up doing that because humans don't like doing that. I mean, like, um, and like, what are consequences of that? I mean, like, that's certainly what comes to my mind because, like, I think here, like, Android does things that most humans would consider like mundane, like
Mm-hmm.
picking up things from the shops and then like cleaning your house. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
um, but again, I mean, like, if you have machines like this, the capabilities it can do is like humongous. I mean, like, why limit them into those kinds of job in which I think humans can do,
I mean,
yeah,
so
well,
that's
or
yeah.
have like pleasure doing it more.
Well, okay. So I think a good example to talk about here might be let's take the example of cooking. Um, I don't know about y'all, but I really enjoy the cooking part of it. There's all the sort of like setup, grocery shopping, managing your fridge, clean up after you cook. All of that is not interesting to me. And if we sort of are making this distinction between humans and robots, One of the things that might come to my mind is that humans are innately curious and creative in a way that, at least the way I see robots, they don't have those capabilities. And if we're trying to cater to humans being able to make the most of the attributes that are unique to them, this creativity, we want robots to do all of the jobs that don't allow people um, to, yeah, sort of like engage with that creativity. I know there are some sort of like other arguments where, you can't be creative all the time. You need downtime for your creative cells to recharge, and maybe there are things that you can do around the house, like when you're, trying to recharge your creativity. Um, but yeah, the distinction to me between those two elements between robots and humans is that humans have sort of inherent creativity that we want to foster and want to give them the space to explore.
Right. Um, I'm curious about things in between. I mean, like, I don't know now, but I used to dabble in like computational and stuff like that, to investigate whether like AI can do something creative or like something that can pass off as creative. And the TV we see just now, people are like contemplating in using androids for professional sports, and I think that would be, um, in a sense, that would be apt. I mean, like, I think it's something that robots would be good at. I mean, like, it's a narrow focus kind of thing, but in a way, if you let robots do that, it's one of those things that, you know, in sports, there's like pride, there's like the spirit to compete and stuff like that that are innately human. Uh, if you're one of the organizing committees of the like sports tournaments and whatnots in this like reality,
Mm-hmm.
what would you do about that? I mean, like, would you let robots take over from humans in like professional sports?
So this is interesting. I think that if androids were to compete, um, wouldn't you rather have them in a separate category of their own? Sure, there can be android sports, but why sort of mix androids and humans? Um, there, like, I've heard arguments which are sort of, which really toe the line here, which are like, uh, you have to define what's a human, what's an android. What about a person who has, like some sort of surgery that makes them, uh, like they have an artificial ligament, or they have screws in their knee, and sort of to what extent can you modify the human body and it still counts it as human is like a question that comes from there, where you sort of decided to make these two arbitrary categories. How do you draw the line there? Like, there's obviously a spectrum between like human body that's been modified to full android.
I'm going to steer a bit in the conversation
Mm-hmm.
to another place. Here we can see, uh, like, the robot Kara trying to spark discussions with Alice, uh, which is like the kid in this situation. What do you think about that? B, like, you've written about like human AI relationships before, and like I think we can see from this point, like Todd is not so nice to his daughter, and like in a sense, he lets his androids do the relationship building with her. Like, what do you think of that in terms of the game and like in your personal opinion on how would that change like how humans perceive relationships?
So, so if you think about this from like a chatbot kind of view, I don't think we are gonna get very far in terms of in terms of being able to um, adequately pass off chatbots as human very soon, and that means that I don't really think we can be able to start using androids as a replacement for humans, and in the broader sense of like social building. But I definitely don't think, if we are going to use androids for some things, I don't think we should be using them for social activity where humans are available for that. So because when it comes down to it, because when it comes down to it, human empathy is the thing that's the most difficult to replicate in androids, and that's a theme we see across the game so much. But I do think it's an interesting experiment to try and encode social mores, for example, and human empathy in androids to teach that to children, or see or like to teach children about outcomes that can happen when you say certain things without the real life consequences. So you can capitalize on not having a human being be the person you're talking to if a child, like for example, say is acting out or has behavior problems, and you present them with an android, and then the android is programmed in such a way to react as a human would react, but you don't have to have a human like be yelled at by someone, for example.
What do you think about that, Abhijat? Anything to add on that? I mean, like, would this like impact the whole human to human relationship dynamic? Like, would there be person who actually prefer being interacted with an android rather than a human?
So to the first point, I think it's interesting, sort of what B says, which is that yeah, we can sort of. There are some things that children may do that may be harmful to their to their counterpart who's like in the conversation with them, and if we can replace that with someone or with an android that cannot sort of suffer real harm from that, then that's good. But yeah, I don't know. I don't really think that, like, there's also a part of that, right, which is what happens if sort of like they don't see, um, they say something hurtful, but like they don't understand that they've caused pain to another person. Maybe, I don't know, maybe you meant be that there would be a natural reaction, but sort of no real harm would be caused. Is that what you meant? Okay. Yeah. So yeah, that might be helpful because lots of people have talked about how social media, when people are mean on social media, when you don't really sort of see the harm you're causing, it can be sort of dehumanizing, and possibly if children or even teenagers are presented with the sort of harm in terms of like the emotional response or the whatever it's evoking in their android counterpart, maybe that will dissuade them from the sort of hurtful behavior. I think that's right.
Yeah, that is definitely interesting. Like, I think here Kara is like being exposed to pretty awkward situation between a dad and his daughter.
Can I come in here
I
quickly?
mean, like, yeah, you can comment here quickly.
Yeah, I found it really interesting how when you become close enough to Alice, the reason that she gives you the key is to be able to show you that you, as Kara, were not in fact hit by a car, but you were beat up by her dad. And I find that really interesting that that's not done through like word of mouth or anything. That's just done by drawings. And if you and then when you play the game, you see that Kara understands that, like she understands why Alice has given her those drawings, why they're in the same order, and the amount of programming and power that an android must have to understand what that means, to mean that, like, to understand that the woman in the dress is her and the girl in the green shirt is Alice. That's a very interesting point that's put there.
Yeah, yeah. Technically, it's very hard to do that. I mean, like, and to capture the nuances and say, like, get the clue. Like, I don't know whether like we will be able to like replicate that computationally. It's very, yeah.
Quick
There's an interesting point you made there.
uh,
Yes, Abhijat.
a quick plug is that a few years, 4 or so years ago, I was working in computer vision, and we did a project on recognizing human sketches, sort of hand-drawn sketches, and it's not easy, but it's not that hard, primarily because sort of at the low level, the main sort of image recognition technology today is a convolutional neural network, and at the low level, it looks at sort of strokes of whatever is on the image that you're trying to recognize, and sort of hand drawn things share that with photos, and there's sort of a real interesting similarity between those two that these systems can exploit.
But I think what's difficult is to make the cognition part in which like how
Oh
to
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
reconcile that part of the drawing into like the mental model with like that's the
Yeah, like
that
recognizing yourself, like the self-awareness and like sort of the ability to make analogies is hard.
oh, and this scene that we're watching right now, um I mean like this is really profound, I think. Carl hits the point in which like in a sense uh androids are superior to humans, yet in this portrayal in the game, humans kind of subjugate them in a sense. And I don't know about you, but like the discourse around, there's a camp that thinks that okay, robots and artificial intelligence would be much better than humans. And then, if that camp turns out to be right, um, what do you guys think ethically we should do if we are faced with an entity that is supposed to be superior than us? I mean, like, this conundrum like happens every time. It's not just robots and androids. I mean, like with aliens and stuff and whatnot. What should we do? Should we automatically feel inferior and like feel defeatist about it, or like should we try to like forge a common relationship? Like biologically, in terms of evolution, it's not a place in which like humans occupy in this earth before, right? So it's a new kind of like biological hierarchy, if you may. Um, what should we do if like one day robots are like demonstrably superior than us? What should we ban them, or what do you think?
It's hard
I know
to,
that's I,
yeah,
I know that's loaded. So like
yeah. Well, so
we're gonna think about it.
there's a question of like, in what terms do you mean they're better? Like, and even if they are better, that doesn't mean sort of um, like if the androids, spoiler alert, in this game are, like they're actually sentient, and they're essentially equivalent to humans, but like mechanical, and they have some differences. Um, maybe the differences are like in terms of physical capabilities. Um, so historically, that has not turned out good for the predecessor to whoever is the sort of like most advanced, or like on top of the evolutionary ladder. But sort of, I hope, if I guess like what 21st, 22nd century, if this is taking place, we will have evolved to a point where we have the recognition of sort of who's valid and who's valuable, is sort of a much broader understanding than when we were ancient era humans who were fighting every day to survive for their life, like fighting to survive, fighting with nature essentially, to not die every day. So yeah, I think coexistence is certainly would be my thing that I would expect there.
Okay. In terms of that point about coexistence, there's an interesting article on Politico. I think a year or two, or I think it's 2 years ago, that said robot president leading the United States like would be a good thing, because like they wouldn't be susceptible to corruption and political bias and stuff like that. And they would like always make the decision like through data and like with the best for the society always in mind. What do you think about this? I mean, like, are you okay with a robot president leading the United States or something like that, or like at least being powerful part of the government? Do you think it's
Well,
an
the
idea
question
that's
I would
plausible?
ask is who designed the robot.
Of
Like,
course.
I don't really think that. I see in the chat, Suitball Jonks is saying, "Let the droids take over."
Joystick.
I would also welcome our robot overlords. But in more seriousness, I think there's if we consider the type of robots that exist today, not the sort of like sentient, independent thinkers that are portrayed in this game, um, there's been sort of robots that are replacing humans in different tasks. So like deciding who gets a mortgage based on their application, predicting recidivism, like how risky is it to let someone like commute their sentence, or how risky are they? Like what's their risk level in terms of committing a repeat offense if they're law offender in the past. All of these things are usually um, done by robots. They're data driven, they're machine learned systems. And we have seen over the past 10 years that these systems, what they do is they're not unbiased or like perfect mathematical creatures like uh, people like to purport. What they are is they sort of like replicate and amplify what is already in society today. So if we had a perfect utopian society, those things would be perfect, unbiased utopian systems, possibly, you know. But that's not the case right now. And because I mean, I'm sure we can all agree that's not the case right now. Anyone wants to debate that point. But if we agree on that, I think then we can sort of make the conclusion automatically that so are the robots likely to be, which means that I don't think that robots will make unbiased and incorruptible precedents for any country. So yeah, again, I ask you sort of like who designed the robot and what are their incentives for doing so.
Yeah, you definitely make a good point there on like like um how like data and stuffs like that are essentially a reflection of our society. If our society is not like as utopian as it sounds, then um things that are made out of that data should be like have the inherent flaws that we have today. So it wouldn't be like a solution onto itself to
Yeah,
have those kinds of things.
and if I can get a little bit more technical, a lot of these sort of machine learning systems that we have today reproduce what is called the mode of data. So, like, basically, if we have a world in which there are many different kinds of people, there's not just if you're applying for a mortgage, you're not just a suburban, well-to-do middle-class family that wants a new home. You can be sort of someone who has a very poor credit history, who's maybe the first person who went to college from their family, and their family lived in a historically poor neighborhood. The data is going to say this person is going to default on their debt. You should not give them a home loan. That doesn't mean that's the right thing to do. And sort of our machine learning systems really cater to the mode of the data, and like really like flatten out the nuances in any data distribution. So I think that that's something to be aware of if you hear about sort of automation in any scenario. I'm not saying this is how it's going to be forever, but right now this is the most common form in which they exist.
Exactly. So like, yeah, what you touched there, I think we will get to revisit that later in the game when we were going through the other chapters, and then maybe we'll have a deeper discussion on that. But like, I want to switch off to B and like see what you're thinking of this scene. Basically, Carl is entrusting Marcus to try to paint a new creation, right? And see what he's capable of. Like, and spoiler alert, I think he can do it. I mean, like, and he can do it well, almost to the level that uh, how Carl is doing. And Carl is a professional painter, a legend of his own right. What do you think about that?
So as you can see at the moment, like Carl is saying to Marcus, "Hey, yeah, you've painted a desk, but you haven't painted a desk. Like you just copied it. It's a copy. It's not a painting. It's not something you've interpreted." And I don't think Marcus could ever paint the desk as a painting instead of a copy. But then in a moment, you'll see that Carl asks him to like close his eyes, and and then I chose for Marcus to like paint something specific with his eyes closed, and then he did it, and then Carl goes, "Oh wow!" And I think, firstly, that's amazing, and that was the one like part of the game that finally made me go like, "Oh, okay, these androids." This is really about like becoming human. They are getting more human as time goes on. But I actually, at the place that I currently work, we had a robotics exhibition a few years ago, and one of the questions that people had to fill out when they left the exhibition was, "Can robots be creative?" And this one kid just yelled, "No!" And um, but robots and androids gaining creativity kind of does scare me a bit because, as we've already said, they have huge computing power, huge power to make so many like quick decisions, and creativity is gonna be like one of the only things humans have left actually. So I think this is gonna be one of the last things androids really like get to be able to do. But I don't want to go as far and like as far as saying that it's never gonna happen. Because honestly, it probably might.
Interesting point. I mean, like, yeah, we've talked about it before about the creativity being like the last frontier of like human intelligence. Like that's one of the biggest technical challenges before we get to an actual artificial general intelligence. Yeah, it might be interesting to like see people's opinion about that. So if you can share like the answers of the people in your exhibitions, maybe later, that would be great. Be to showcase in our future installments of this kind of event.
Yeah,
Maybe we can.
and I want to hear from people in chat. What do they think? Like, what do they think about sort of robot creativity and what's possible? Yeah.
Yeah, let's see if people responded to that. Like it would be amazing to see what people think. Um, I definitely think it can be simulated in a way. in a sense, I've done things before in which I try to like get computers to compose music. That was my thesis, like 5 years ago. When I was finishing undergraduates, I teach like um, basically I teach computer how to compose a jazz bass line. So in a sense, in order to create that, it's just a kind of structured randomness in a sense, but it still can't beat like the the nuances that you would get, the little things that you would get from a human. And I wonder, as like technology grows, whether that could happen.
Yeah, and I think there's like a sort of like philosophical question of like what is creativity. That's sort of like that we're all kind of skirting around. That's hiding in plain sight as we're having this discussion, right? Like, is
Yeah.
structured randomness, like, is sampling from some distribution really, um, really creativity? You know, so
Yeah, and they're saying there's nothing new under the sun, right? So like sometimes what is perceived like as a creative innovation is actually like a rehash of something that has been done before, or just applied to another medium. But I like to like shift a bit into what's going on in the game right now. Like actually, I think the android here, Connor, is like a detective droid, and he's scanning people, right? Right, B, uh, for identities because he's looking for his would-be partner. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, so he's looking for Hank, who he's been sent to find. But Connor is the first of his kind, as you can say. So he's the first detective droid that they've made. So he has abilities that many other androids do not, and one of those abilities is to scan faces. Um, and and this is definitely like a disturbing precedent for the future. Um, but as I'm saying that, like you can like if you go up to someone and ask like, "Hi, what's your name?" and then they give it to you and they talk to you about where you're from, and like where they're from, that's often the same info as Connor's getting here. But Connor is getting information about, has this person committed a crime? What's their job? And like other stuff like that. So that's like very personal information that could be available to like so many people like at a moment's notice, because it's very important to remember that Connor is like the gateway and the medium to other people getting this information. And for me, like it's very like it's kind of easy to forget that, because it's so easy um think of people I just said the word people like and androids like Connor and Kara being human, because that's what the manufacturers want to achieve. They want Connor and Kara to approximate humanness to the greatest extent possible, but they are fundamentally just are being like used for the people who made them and the people who have bought them to get info that they wouldn't otherwise have gotten.
Exactly. I mean, like this begs the question: what does it mean to like privacy when we have drones that can profile us instantly, moving freely among us, like, and like doing so without consent, like the comment in the chat right now. I mean, like, we already have incidents in which like law enforcement use computer vision for discriminative policing. I believe it's after the BLM protests in Minneapolis, and then how could we ensure that this is good for the society? I mean, like, um, if this kind of technology is here, care to comment about that, Abhijat?
so yeah, there's. I mean, again, I feel like there's so many different ways this like we can go with this, but um, like there's sort of some commentary there about just surveillance and like what it means to be surveilled, who does surveillance, who does it serve, what is the sort of purpose of surveillance. Um, but if we just talk about privacy, um, we have the sort of expectation that I guess we have to like decide as a society and like encode into our laws what privacy means and where we have the right to expect it. So, for example, I think right now most people are not expected to like have a reasonable right to privacy when they're in public. That's the sort of like going understanding. So if I'm driving along on the street, I can film you because it's a public space, and I can film the space, and you just happen to be in it. That's like sort of how it works right now. So if you wanted to collect data, sort of, just on the street, you were, let's say, one of the many autonomous driving companies that operate in Pittsburgh. You could mount any number of cameras on your on the vehicle, and that would be totally fine. But if you're in someone's home, if you're sort of like in a private space, that's no longer allowed, right? Like that's the sort of distinction we're making right now. Do androids change that? I think what's happening is technology, as it pervades, it's sort of bringing that distinction to light. And what we have to do is we have to examine if we're comfortable with that distinction. Like, are we okay with no right to privacy in public? Or can we say that sort of someone has a right to privacy as long as they don't do anything suspicious, for example? So there are many ways in which we can sort of like sort of have this discussion and reach conclusions. But I think what AI is doing, or what sort of these technologies are doing, is like making these differences really stark and bringing them up as important and for us to debate.
I mean, there's this question of like how deep you go with that information. I mean, like if you just like take your likenesses and the fact that you were there, as in your example of like a self-driving car. I mean, like I think most people wouldn't object to that, but like to like take it further and do the things that are like demonstrated in this particular scene, which like you can see like the occupation, the name, date of birth, and then even criminal records. I mean, like I think people would be wouldn't be too happy about that, if I may say so, right?
Yeah, I think that's also fair. Like, there's a question of not only like where you are, it's also about sort of what's happening to the data and who's looking at it. So you may authorize. So a sort of an example that has recently been in the news, or like over the last year, I think was in Singapore, I want to say, where there was a governmental app that was tracking, like you would put it on your phone and it would track everyone in who had that app, and if they were sort of in close proximity to each other and one person tested positive for COVID, it would alert everyone else who had been in, a 6 feet radius of that person. And that's like a great thing, right? Like that's a sort of good it's just like a good application. At the time, people were told that this app location data is only going to be used for this purpose of sort of contact tracing. But about a month or so later, Singapore local police used that data to like find alibis for people in some sort of investigation. I forget exactly what the nature of the investigation was, and that data was released from one governmental agency to the police, which is another governmental agency, without the consent of the users who had given that data. And that I think is really problematic, right? Like that sort of, there is a question of consent there that, we really need to think about and legislate.
Yeah, what do you think about that, B? I mean, like consent if we have like drones running around and like collecting our data, and what do they do with it? I mean, like, should 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 there be like a nutritional working warning like we have on food on androids on like what it could do to us? I mean, like what data they capture and like what they're doing with their data. Would that be possible, or like would that be feasible to do, in your opinion?
Can you give me 1 second because my alarm is just going off on my phone?
All right.
I think one thing I would say there is just that it's yeah, you're right. It's about consent and about transparency, right? Like the people have a right to know what exactly are the limits of the thing that they're consenting to, and they have to have recourse to enforce the value of that consent and sort of what happens when sort of data was used in a way that was not consented to. Anyway, go ahead, Dee.
Yeah, so I think it all comes back to the fact that androids are essentially machines that we use for our own benefit when we as humans aren't in that space or don't have the capacities that androids have. So when and when it comes down to that, and we remember that they A aren't human, and B they don't have their own morality. They have morality that is coded into them by whoever makes them. Then consent to having androids run around and getting data is exactly the same as like everything else we've ever seen with like collecting consent for data. So through like research participant forms or like having informed consent when you like check into a place where you give them your data to let them say to you whether you've been in close contact with someone who's had COVID or has tested positive. There was in the Netflix doc called Coded Bias. There was this van in an area of London, I think, where this group called the Big Brother Watch had kind of set up camp and were telling everyone that the area had CCTV, and there was this one guy who walked past and pulled his hood over his head so people couldn't see him. And the police immediately came to him and said, "Oh, well, you covered your face. That's very suspicious. We have to investigate you." And obviously, this is a huge conflict between, like, does this person just not want to give their data away where it could be used for almost anything, or were they guilty and were just trying to hide it? But it's much more likely to be option A.
Yeah. In any way, like, as we were saying, like, it's very hard to like, if if you have these things around, to make consent and transparency something that's workable, I think, and there would be only always be a tug of war, in which like progress is like signified, like in a sense. This is hard to articulate. Sorry. In a sense, which is like which is the greater good here? I mean, like the progress that you might have by like having those data be processed in the way that we cannot, like, we couldn't possibly comprehend, but it's supposedly for our greater good, or like make sure that everything is categorically correct, in which we have consent for all of those. Like, there's always this question, like, progress and like propriety, like categorical good, in a sense, that should come from consent. And at in the game right now, we're seeing something like a reverse minority report of sorts. It uh, basically, Connor sees something that that happens in the present, and with some cues, he can recreate what's happening in the past. Almost certain. In practice, we know that this more likely wouldn't happen, but then I was curious. We're talking about bias and like societal, like that might happen due to like societal implications that might happen because of like the use of like features, and then treat this as like some sort of causation, if you may. What would happen if this kind of technology be used, if the precision of it, the like we can't be so sure of its accuracy? I mean, like, should we use this kind of reproductive technology in reproducing the past if we're not so sure about its accuracy? I believe there's tons of like ways like people could play with it and like di- use it for nefarious means, especially in like law enforcement, politics, and stuff like that. What do you think?
Yeah, I think, um, yeah, I mean, I guess it depends, right, on how good it is, what you're trying to use it for. I think the stakes really matter here. This is
Yeah.
like a thing where the details matter. I think you have to think here about um, the harm, essentially, like the harm that such a system going wrong can cause. And you have to evaluate those harms and based on that make a decision on whether to not use a weak system like that, like you're describing. So something that's been in the news recently, but is sort of a good analog for this, is law enforcement using face recognition, right? Um, Face recognition is, somewhat accurate. Like, it's not amazing, but it's not sort of uh, just like a failure of a technology either. It's like somewhere in the middle. It's pretty good in controlled settings, right? Like if you're just trying to maybe uh, unlock your phone, possibly like in a situation where the stakes of your data are not that high, you're trying to unlock your phone, maybe it's fine, right? Versus if you're trying to convict a person based solely on face recognition data, or even like arrest them, or do any sort of like law enforcement intervention based on face recognition data, that's really, we've seen that's really dangerous. And because of what we talked about earlier, um, the way our societal problems and biases are sort of reflected and amplified in these autonomous systems, it tends to be that the harm falls on already the most marginalized and vulnerable communities. And that means that really what we want is to sort of like think about the harms that can be caused, and like by the sort of like wrong outcomes of this technology, and based on that make a decision. And really what we want to do is also involve the communities that are most likely to be harmed, that are most vulnerable to those like by the sort of like wrong outcomes of these systems and these decisions that are made based on these systems, to be involved in that consideration.
So on your point there, I mean, like we know right now, like the face recognition technology. I think I've read a lot of articles and like scientific papers on that, saying that the data set being used for like our like cutting edge face recognition technology is heavily male and white, and I think their accuracy fares really badly if tested in minority communities. On your point there, you think that the decision of using these kinds of technology depends on how good they would fare against minorities, and like we have to get them involved in like in actually setting this on deployment, right?
Um, I think that's one aspect of the problem. That's an important
Yeah.
aspect of the problem, one that sort of is visible on the technical side, really. Um, but I think that there are other aspects to that problem, right? Like, even if we were to fix face recognition, we already have a system in which sort of we already have a policing system, for example, in this country, that the sort of like harmful impacts of that are on particular communities. And sort of adding more technology is not going to solve that, it's only going to amplify that. So it's not just whether or not the technology itself is biased, but sort of the processes within which it's being used are also a factor. So yes, you can involve more minority or marginalized communities in the development of the technology, but also in the process of deploying it, in the process of designing sort of the, I guess you can call it, it's kind of like a euphemism, but like you can call it public safety. In designing the public safety of those communities, you want to involve those communities themselves.
Okay.
Like they should be
At this
like,
point,
just to sort of wrap it up, I want to say that they should be involved in the decision. Not only you should involve them in making facial recognition technology, they should be involved in the decision of, should government funding be given to developing facial recognition technology to make our communities safer, or do we need, more jobs in this community? And that's where the government funding should go. Like, that's basically my point, is that you shouldn't make the decision and then involve people. You want to involve people sort of at the beginning.
yeah, it at a higher level of attraction in which their power would be bigger, in a sense, empowering them to make bigger strokes, if you may, in the community. I'm going to go back in the game here, and like I think at this point, with the investigation, Connor has deduced that the perpetrator of this crime is actually an android killing um, their master per se. If we can say it that way. Sorry. Um, and he's on his way to capture that android. This begs the question: if we have like androids that like deployed in this way, who is liable if they kill somebody, if they hurt somebody? Maker, the androids themselves, uh, the owner for not using it properly, or like, um, I'm curious about this. I mean, like, what do you think, both of you, on this problem? How is accountable when somehow these droids kill? Because in
I
here, I don't think the company that's making it, CyberLife, is gets liable for this kind of deviancy of sorts. You were saying, Abhijat?
I've spoken a lot, so I'm gonna let B take this one first.
Okay, thanks. So originally, I would say that the company is not liable for this, like, really. But I mean, to an extent, yes, they are. But where they aren't liable is the fact that like as far as I know, like they never programmed the android to have the like emotional shock um, response. So what's happened is Carlos, the guy who was killed by the android, was high, took a bat, swung at the android, and what Connor saw there was that the android got an emotional shock and then wanted to defend itself. And that's what any human would have done too, I think. But I don't think the company would be liable for that. And to an extent, neither would the android be, because if an android experiences an emotional shock, as we see in this game, they become deviant. It's not up to the company. But maybe since they become deviant, the android does gain responsibility. Maybe what happens when androids become deviant is that they become moral agents, and if someone is a moral agent, that means that they have a responsibility for like what they do and their own outcomes. Because there's a difference between being sapient and being conscious and having self-awareness. Um, so androids are sapient. They are capable of thinking and reasoning. But I don't know whether to answer the question of whether if something isn't self-aware, it's liable for what it's doing.
So what you're saying here, if the android have some kind of consciousness on what they do and can demonstratively make moral choices in what they do, they should be liable. I mean, like if they try to kill somebody and then they should burn the consequences of it. That what you're saying, in a sense, if they can like have moral choices on it.
Yeah, so if they know that they are killing something, then they are liable. But if it's simply if an emotional shock is the result of just like massive trauma, which obviously it is, and the android basically just goes berserk, does anything it can to protect itself, and right then it was, hey, look, there's a knife, I can see a knife, I need this person dead, otherwise they're going to kill me. So but maybe there was an option for the android to have fled, but we don't get that option within the game to see if that had been an option for Carlos's android. So yeah, I guess it depends on whether the android knows what it's doing. But I don't think the company would be fully liable either.
In that point, I mean, like if the if we should like hold the androids accountable, um, I mean, like
Before we go down that path, can I say that like I think what B said it makes sense, but I want to add that if it's possible for an Android that a company is selling to be deviant, that should be either a warning on the label, right? Like, don't do this or it's going to go deviant. If you didn't do that, then yes, I think the company can be liable for the ill effects of said deviancy.
Yeah, I definitely think so too. But as far as I know, the company had no idea this could happen. But if they did know, then yeah, there should definitely be a warning. But
Even if
full
even if
disclosure, I have not played the whole game.
even if they didn't know, I think like there's some liability there. Like if you don't know that your car can break down, like the car that you're manufacturing can break down in XYZ way, that's sort of still something that the car company is responsible for.
Yeah, like a car company and to the same extent, an Android company should take every precaution to make sure it works in every possible way. They should test the Android in a ton of different like places and situations and stuff. But I guess it's much easier to test cars in that way than it is to test androids, since they're
yeah,
standing in for humans.
yeah. In the sense, yeah. To add to that point, I mean, like there's if there's no liability whatsoever to the company, like we've seen examples in which companies like basically forego their responsibilities in making what the product they're selling to be safer and ethical, in a sense, and like I think it would be very if we like leave it up all to the Android itself, it would be very easy to the makers to like just be hands off and like, oh, whatever he's doing is on his own. It's like basically like dropping all responsibilities. Meanwhile, it's still a product, so like um I could think of several unintended consequences if we take it as okay, this robot is sentient and like it's liable for its own actions. Um, I think I think it would be a bit dangerous, in my opinion. But I don't know whether that applies if we actually have droids in our society. It's really hard to tell, really. Um, and at this part of the game, I think Kara saw abuse being done by Todd to Alice, and in a sense, Todd is trying to do more abuse to Alice, and Kara breaks out of her programming to basically do something and prevent Todd from doing so. Um, this is basically a moral conundrum, right? I mean, like, what's what should androids do in this point? Like we see people try to encode morality. I mean, MIT have their moral machines and stuff like that. I mean, like, what should the android do at this point? Should 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 the android threaten or like subdue the human trying to inflict pain or violence to other humans? Should it be just a bystander, or I don't know. I mean, like, what do you think should Android do in the situation? I mean, like, there's a lot of like parables and like rule of thumbs being floated around for this. I mean, like, we have like Asimov's three rules of robotics, that in which like a robot can do no harm, a robot can do no harm, and stuff like that. But in this kind of situation, it's really hard, right, to see what is harm. I mean, like, it's doing something in the interest of the kid in this context is Alice. I mean, like, what what should androids do in this like morally challenging situations? I know this is not an easy question, but I want to hear the opinion of both of you on this. Maybe B wants to start.
Okay, so like, oh my god, like, oh my god, I have been like studying this question for like so long for the past week, and I, it is so hard. So, firstly, it kind of comes back to what we were looking at with Connor's mission and Carlos, who was killed by his own android, and how the android wanted to protect itself. But in this situation, Kara like has picked up and learned that Alice is being hurt and abused and mistreated by Todd, and now it's no longer just about Kara or like an android protecting herself. It's about protecting another person. Um, but um, and she has learned that Todd has mistreated her, Kara, as well, because Todd himself said like, if you move, I'll bust you up worse than last time, and she's been shown that by Alice. But in a situation that's like that's apart from the game, I don't know, because I mean there's a reason why Asimov's three laws are heralded as bad laws, because they conflict with each other so much. The so the situation that we've just witnessed is probably the biggest conflict of these three laws, because a human is trying to harm another human, and in order to get second human out of harm, android must harm first human. So it's a no-win situation for those laws, and I do not have a straight answer.
How about you, Abhijat? I mean, like, I think uh, the gameplay is done by now, but yet I want to hear your opinion on that. Um, what should the android do? It's very hard to tell, actually. Like, I want to know what you think about this.
So I think more or less, I think yeah, I agree with B what she said basically about the conflicts between as well as different laws, because you're not going to. Do we have the laws, by the way? Maybe we should like um say them. I think the first one is like an android should not harm a human, right?
I think so. I think so. That's the first one.
Don't harm
Definitely.
a human by or by inaction allow a human to come to harm. Uh,
Yep.
the robot will obey any instruction given to it by a human. And the third law is the robot will avoid actions or situations that could cause harm to come to itself.
Yes.
So obviously, as B outlined, the first law, just the first law here is conflicting with itself. There are two clauses to it: don't harm a human, or by inaction allow a human to come to harm. The second part of which, clearly um, is in conflict with the first part, because she has to harm Todd in order to not allow harm to come to Alice. Um, but then there's sort of these questions, right? So I don't believe a robot in any circumstances should be allowed to harm a human. I think there's I think I don't know if we were doing the spoiler, but I think Alice is not a human.
Yes, Alice is an android.
Yes.
Spoiler alert, yes.
Yeah, so Alice is an android. Essentially, what has happened here is an android who believes that a different android is a human has killed a human to protect said android. So there are these considerations about like what is belief, right? Like a robot may believe something and act on these laws and then kill someone. So I just think that like a robot should just not be allowed to harm anyone. Basically, is my take on this. Um, it gets sort of too complicated if you try to like litigate based on the belief of the human, whether or not that of the android, and whether or not that belief is correct. I think that gets into like murky territory. So yeah, I
That's
think
really interesting because one of the scenes that we saw on the TV was that the president had just okayed like 200,000 robot military units.
mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think those should exist either. So
Yeah, no, me neither.
yeah. Um, well, I don't. Yeah, there are all the other people, right? Who are the other side of it is like, oh, you should allow them to exist because otherwise we're putting humans in danger. Um,
So I think what we can take from all this discussion is it's actually very hard to come up with something that is really morally correct in all the situation. It always like ends up being in the gray zone in which like we don't know for sure what's right and what's wrong, right? And on that note, like I think the game as we're going to play it has ended at this point. So um, I'm sure there's a lot of other things to talk about. I mean, this is a pilot. I mean, like, I feel like we can go deeper in each topic. But the way we go at it, like, in which we go chapter by chapter and we like talk about like different facets of AI ethics, we couldn't go much deeper, but maybe in future series we can do more of that. So I think this definitely has sparked up a lot of interesting questions and points for you guys from you guys, and I hope the folks watching this stream would start to think more about how AI should be regulated and how should we interact with those in the future. Um, so in a sense, I want to conclude this discussion. Maybe I want to conclude it with closing statements from both of you on like how this, your opinion on how this game has portrayed like issues pertaining like having AI society and like your general opinion about like how we should perceive AI in the future. Maybe B wants to start on that.
Sure. So I was just thinking now, in the situations we've seen in the game, all of the androids, the androids themselves are all portrayed as like good people. So Kara wants to protect Alice, and she like wants to, but she also wants to obey the orders given to her by Todd, but to an extent but only to an extent that would mean that she like quote unquote acts morally if she were a human, and I think it's quite interesting that we don't see like we don't see the people who like made Connor, for example, but Connor is also portrayed as a good person. So he doesn't use his detective skills to like bring harm to people that he shouldn't be bringing harm to, and but I guess like he does but he does tell Hank that the android is in the attic even when the android like acts very desperate and says like, please don't tell them that I'm here. So yeah, there definitely is a lot to think about with all of these different excerpts of the game, and I think that Quantic Dream did a really good job of curating these specific scenes to spark lots of lots of stuff to talk about regarding the treatment of AI and the future of AI.
Thank you, B, for that wonderful closing point. Abhijat, your take?
Um, I think, yeah, what B said, I agree with. I would sort of make the distinction that I think Quantic Dreams focus really on some sympathetic characters and sort of like storylines with sort of narrow focuses, at least in what we've seen. I would like to see sort of more of an exploration of what we talked about earlier, sort of what is the broader impact this is having on sort of the society these people are living. 35% unemployment is unimaginable, right? Like the sort of state that would cause in society would be reflected, I think, in like many, many more ways than I think were shown here. Um, I also think that we would see more, yeah, just sort of more changes in how people build communities, and like, I would want to sort of see some of that, and also what we talked about earlier, which is like which jobs go to androids. I think was not very accurately portrayed um, by this game, because I feel like the incentives would shift in a way that people would do people jobs more than uh, you know other jobs that they're doing.
All right, and thank you, Abhijat, for that closing remark. On that point, I want to thank all of you for like participating in this. I think it's been an hour and a half since we started, so I think it's time to close this discussion. Thank you very much for agreeing to do this. I know B, it's very late for you out there in Aberdeen. Um, I hope you don't mind partaking in discussion and this fun for you. Also, Abhijat, thanks for doing this, man. I mean, like, thank you for like sharing to us your insights about the technology and like what you know about like things in society and like how should we. I think what we learned from you today is like we have to try to take it on a bigger level, see it in a bigger picture on how these things could affect our fabrics of society. And I really appreciate that. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for Avi and Andy, who's have helping us behind the scenes to make this happen. To all of you streamers, thank you for watching. Um, if you want to contribute more to this kinds of engagement, there's a link in the stream. Please fill up the links bit.ly /cmu-ai-ethics-series 1. It's our suggestion box if you want to suggest other games or maybe other like modes or presentations in which we can talk about issues in AI ethics. Please do so. And I would like to thank all of you for tuning in this past 1.5 hour. On that note, bye from Pittsburgh. See you in other engagements. Thank you. Bye.